Hey Rebels, my name is Matthew Barton, and I'm the host of the Rebellion Brewing podcast. In the mid to late 90s, a bar located on South Albert Street in Regina was a gathering place for musical misfits. It was a place for people who didn't exclusively listen to top 40 radio. A place where live music was profitable and sustainable as an opportunity for musicians traveling across Western Canada. All before the internet and Napster kind of blew a hole in the whole model of making music and changed everything forever. The bar I'm talking about is known as Checkers. It was the kind of place that inspired an enduring loyalty. Today's guest is Nolan Tabashniuk. He is responsible for a lot of the music and a lot of the bands that came through Checkers. And he's the driving force behind the Checkers reunion tour happening at the Revival Music Club on May 1st. So let's get into it. Nolan, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me, Matt. It's great to be here.
How's it going?
I am awesome. I'm awesome.
For people who didn't know what Checkers was, for maybe people who missed it, what was it about?
Checkers wasn't about a bar. Checkers was a gathering place, and it in of itself. It was a culture. At the time in the early '90s, so my time at Checkers was a small window of the time that it operated, but I worked there from about on and off from about 1993 to 1996. So. Checkers at the time was a byproduct of a fantastic music scene that was happening in Canada at the time. You had a lot of bands that were traveling that could make a half decent living, bouncing from club to club across Canada, playing small gigs, and we had some real staples. The Canadian music scene was, as it continues to be today, alive and well, but the independent garage band had a chance of actually booking shows in various locations across multiple provinces. And Regina had several great scenes. We had the Owl at the university in the old building before that building was demolished and moved into the new student center there that had lots of great talent and lots of great big name bands today were there very early in their careers.
Like who?
Probably one of the best ones I saw was Green Day on the Kerplunk tour. That I remember very early when they had released Kerplunk. I think I still would have been in high school. It was probably 1990, 1991. They came back for the Dookie album in 94, but that's kind of when things exploded for them. So many big name bands came through as opening acts. I remember one of my good friends was a huge fan of Therapy from Ireland. Screw that, forget about that. I don't want to think about anything like that. Screw that, forget about that. I don't want to know about anything like that. 1994, they had won something like MTV European Music Song of the Year, and were playing football stadiums in the UK, and came to Canada and opened for the Doughboys. And nobody knew who they were, but they hit the stage with the arena level production and just blew the doors off the place. So we had these great little venues where we'd pay $5 or $10, and we would go see these bands. Well, those of us who were enjoying that music scene, we would pick up the albums. We would buy the CD while we were there, the cassette sometimes, and it would enter the playlist at the bar. And people who were at the show would come over and be like, yeah, that was a great show last weekend. I was there. It's great to see you're playing it already. So we used that and those acts to be able to build. So you had all these great Canadian bands. You had Salmon Blaster. Salvador Dream.
Relentless reflection.
Rush Hermit. Sloan used to play in Regina all the time. And they always put on a great show. They loved the all ages shows. There's so many acts that I could name. Our Lady Peace in their early days would come through a lot.
I let go of the world that was holding a passenger that could not fly. In search of souls, in search of something, let it go and let it slide.
But Regina's following, on the checker scene was driven in the mid-90s by the likes of the Watchmen.
My life is a stereo. Turn me on and let's go. Turn me up louder. I'll scream as loud and clear as I can scream. And if you like.
The Tragically Hip played a few shows in Regina very, very early 90s. I think there's a video somewhere of a 1990 concert recorded, I think at Channel 1 at the time, maybe.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
That was Bob Van Cise. He's up on stage singing with them.
Yeah.
I've seen that one.
It couldn't come at a worse time.
So, we had that was going on. And so, those acts dominated our playlist, but we were the only place other than Channel 1 at the time, the Owl at the time. Owl didn't really have like a regular bar night where they had DJs and dance kind of stuff going on. They just kind of had their acts, was the big thing there. But we were, we drew the people. The people came because they knew it was always going to be full. And the people really loved the music. They were very passionate about the music. And it drew the people that were compelled to listen to, the messages of the Rage Against the Machine.
So rip the mic, rip the stage, rip the system. I was born to rage against, so fist in your face in a place, and I'm about to stop clearly. Know your enemy.
And the messages of the, I hate everyone, or my life's, bitter and miserable, and woe is me, and the people who, that really spoke. That was really the voice of a generation at the time. So it fed our success. The bar grew. The bar expanded.
What was the culture of Checkers compared to the other bars or other scene at the time?
Everyone was welcome. So, and especially in the early days, like you didn't necessarily, you didn't have to dress up to go out. There was no dress code. You didn't have to worry about.
Wait. Other clubs had dress codes?
Oh, I remember. I don't know if they formally had dress codes, but you had like after work crowds downtown in a couple of the clubs, the dance clubs, where the people would go straight over from work, and it's the suit generation, and it was Tequila Tuesday or whatever it was downtown. That wasn't our scene. That wasn't who the people that would come and spend time with us on the weekends. It was really just people who wanted to get out and enjoy good music. So we did for a while. We had jam nights on Wednesdays. It started the old Buck Draft Wednesdays, which turned into a massive, absolutely massive draw in its later years. But we hosted open mic nights where me and a couple friends would get up there and we'd play a few songs, and whoever showed up that night could jump in on the jam session. So I remember Big Danny was a promoter. He promoted a lot of punk band shows in the city and stuff, and came in one night and said, "Hey, I got these guys. They're here from Vancouver, and they got no place to play. They're called Gob."
I want to jump in a lake, sun shining down on a beach in the summer. I want to jump in a lake, sun shining down on a beach in the summer.
Can they play tonight? And we were like, "Are you kidding me? Like, Gob's in Regina, and they need a place to play. Yeah, for sure, you can play our jam night, right?" We had lots of those stories as acts came through, and if they didn't have a gig booked that night, we'd accommodate whatever.
I was talking to one guy, and he was saying you could go there to Checkers and hear songs that were never, ever going to be played on mainstream radio. He's like, I would wait until almost the very end of the night just to make sure that I heard that one song that I wanted to hear that you would never hear on the radio and you didn't have the album yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, we were open and receptive to supporting things like industrial music. So, 9 Inch Nails was a staple. KMFDM was a staple. You had a lot of these bands that no chance ever of radio play, and the best example I can give you is 9 Inch Nails, because they were a staple in our playlist for a minimum of 2 tracks from the Pretty Hate Machine album almost any night. And then when they came out with the single Closer, that everybody caught on with the public, and they all loved the lyrics because it was really controversial and it was really raw and really authentically, almost nihilistic in its messaging, that people were like, yeah, that's a message. That's sometimes how we feel. And they really connected with that song. Well, that blew up into, we'll call it mainstream, even though this was definitely an underground artist with, the mind of a Trent Reznor, who had no interest in being involved in top 40 music, and had a long storied background of, expressing emotions of frustration and depression and hatred and angst, which was was dominant in our mindset as students at the time, at university students at the time. So I think you always had the ability, and we could introduce whatever we wanted. So we'd bring in like some of the I remember playing Ween in there.
Ride my ass like a horse in a saddle. Now you're up shit's creek with a turd for a paddle, and I can't cope a piss up a rope.
It's, like experimental couple crazy brothers recording crazy sounds in their garage, and it's recorded on an album. Well, we'd play it sometimes, and we had people come in and be like, yeah, I'm a huge Ween fan. I never think I'd hear Ween at the bar, but we tried it, and people liked that we tried it, and they expected to hear certain underground classics, and we fed that to them as well.
The Ramones,
yeah,
the Clash,
yeah, all that was part of in the early days of Checkers. Like you had the XTC.
Dear God, don't know if you know this, but your name is all the quotes in this book. Those crazy humans wrote it, you should take a look.
You had New Order.
How does it feel to treat me like you do? When you laid your hands on me and told me who you are.
All those sort of underground or new wave bands, Smiths, Clash, great examples. And so, even in the reunion nights, we kind of start the night with that, because that's kind of what we remember in the early days of Checkers. Was we'd go there and we'd hear a lot of that music.
When you guys talk about it, when I talk to guys who used to go to Checkers, because it closed down right before I was able to go out to the bar. Like, I remember as a kid driving down Albert Street and seeing the Checkers sign, but by the time I was old enough to go drinking and into that scene, it was done. But when I talk to guys of a certain age who are just like a couple years older than me, they speak so fondly of it. It resonates with them. And one guy was like, I can bring in my own CD from my home and hand it to the guy at Checkers, and he'll play one of my songs that I want to share with my friends or share with people at the bar. I don't know anyone that would do that now.
Yeah, we did that a lot. And I think, I got to tip my hat to Dave from X-Ray, because Dave and Robin Cernick, actually, those two guys. So they a couple record shops downtown where, was it X-Ray? Records on Wheels?
Records on Wheels.
Records on Wheels in Scar Street Mall. So and Dave was a staple there for years, and he was a huge conduit for us, because I'd go in there and he'd be like, "Hey, what's up?" I'd go in every week or couple weeks, and I'd say, "What's new? Like, what'd you bring in, or any new punk CDs?" And he had the full gamut, but he knew music so well. So we'd go in and maybe buy a couple CDs, take them home, check them out, and go, "Yeah, this is cool. This fits into that popcore punk set part of the night when we were playing the Pennywise." And the Green Day and that stuff in a set, Lagwagon covering Brown Eyed Girl, right?
Do you remember when we used to sing sha la 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 la?
It, like that stuff, we'd throw it in there, or maybe it was an industrial piece that we can include with, with the Nine Inch Nails playlist as part of it, part of the night. Canadiana was another big one. Like, such a high percentage of Canadian bands. So we would always give them a listen, because if it fit the genre, we would do it. And the bar at one point, I remember them pushing us because we were struggling on Thursday nights. And at the time, the hotel was in receivership at the time. It was being managed by a hotel consulting company or something out of Manitoba. And they were saying, "Well, we got to do this. Thursday nights are really big at Manhattans. So we got to try and steal some of that crowd. So let's do techno music on Thursday nights." And I was like, not my thing. I mean, you're paying me, so I guess I'll try this. So I had to go out and learn some of this dance music, and I didn't really know it. And I went out and bought a bunch of the CDs and Much Music extended mix party things where they, anyway. So we tried to do that, and it failed miserably. Like, it, nobody would come looking for dance music, and we would never incorporate it on the other nights ever. So whenever we try to deviate from that environment of testing and listening to new artists and up and coming and Canadian content, whenever we got away from that, it didn't work very well. So
Was it because it didn't feel authentic?
Yeah, because it wasn't why we were there. Like, that's why we drew. Like, I mean, I was a little punk rock kid. I was a terrible skateboarder, but I loved skateboarding. And in that scene, you had the Misfits, and you had, Agent Orange, and you had all these, skate rock. I mean, was the stuff in the 80s that we talked about. And so I kind of was fueled by that in my early teenage years. And it evolved into going to see those shows at the Student Union, the big drill car. All No Means No. Great example, great Canadian act. No Means No played, I don't know how many times they played in Regina, but such a good live show. And so we fed off of those music scenes and wanted to spend time in a place where there was a high likelihood that we would hear the same kind of music. And that, at the time, other than Channel 1, that was really the only place that we could regularly hear that kind of music.
Because there was no internet, no YouTube, no streaming.
Sadly, no.
So you couldn't just walk on to the internet and find your little clique, your little group.
Yeah.
You had to maybe be more conscious, more, purposeful?
Yeah.
In your search for tunes.
You did, absolutely. Think about any time that you have bought something online and you get the artificial intelligence of the online provider saying, "Here's, if you bought this, listeners who bought this will also be interested in this." Well, I love that now because, I buy a couple of tracks or a couple CDs that are albums that I want to listen to by a couple artists. I'm looking for those suggestions. So we did that at the bar. We did that all the time. I remember some of my friends coming up saying, you need to play more of this or more of the, we had for a while there. I mean, everybody got into 70s funk there for a while. So we were spinning like Parliament, like Jungle Boogie, and like that was kind of part of the night, and it made a great transition into stuff like D-Light and
Groove is in the heart. Groove is in the heart.
and some of that great stuff in the early 90s as well that we were able to play. So it was great that people brought it, and it was great that people came because of the music, because it really was their only outlet for that sort of genre.
One of the things that Mark and I were talking about with Checkers with you guys is he said when he'd go there, he felt welcome. He didn't feel like he had a place where he was welcome, but then Checkers existed and it was like, oh, this is where I belong.
Yeah.
And one of the things he said to me was they were Rebellion before Rebellion existed. A lot of their energy, he said, has inspired Rebellion's craft beer, Rebellion's attitude. And when you look at our tap room, you look at our music and our playlist and stuff, he says Checkers' DNA is in Rebellion's DNA.
Wow.
That's not really a question, it's just a comment.
Yeah, it's pretty profound. And I'm thankful. There isn't a day that doesn't go by that I'm not thankful for the experiences that I had, the people that I met, the relationships that I still maintain today with some of our bar staff. And I like I said, I started there in 93. The place was long successful before I got there, and Roberto Giannini was the DJ there for a number of years. Darren Mitchell was there before. These are guys today that have gone on to do some pretty incredible things in the business community, and they say the same thing. So it really has become, part of all of our DNA, because, there isn't a day or two that goes by that I don't think about the great times that we had there, or the funny stories, or any of the experiences that we had, and some of the stuff we saw. My goodness, over the years there too. That would make sense to me, and I think, I tip my hat to Rebellion. Part of the reason why why with our Checkers event, we knew we needed to connect with the Rebellion crew, is the fact that you guys embody what we in the industry. You guys embody what we embodied at the time in the nightclub scene.
Talking about Rebellion roots, Checkers roots, let's get into some beer, man.
I'm totally good with that.
Today we're drinking Hazy IPA, and I've had this beer on the show before. We've reviewed it before, but the reason I'm bringing it back is because we tweaked the recipe. We've got some El Dorado hops, Santorini, Lotus, and oh man, I can't remember the last name now. I just checked with Zal.
It's a mosaic.
Not Mosaic hops though.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Chinook. Chinook was the last hops, and this is with a hazy strain of yeast. Super special beer. I think it's amazing, and it's just been something that's insane for us. And when we launched it, nobody was really doing hazy IPAs here. People were like, wow, we're into the clear beer thing. And we're like, we want to change the way you think about beer. We want to change the way you perceive what beer is. And that's what we're trying to do with Hazy.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Cheers.
One of the other things I want to say about Hazy is it's not bracingly, aggressively bitter.
No, it really isn't, actually. I'm a fan. I have burned through several cases of the previous batch under the old recipe, and this is really nice.
Can you discern a difference, or is it just delicious?
I'd say that this is just plain awesome.
One of the things I like to say to people is give IPAs a second chance if you didn't like it the first time. And if you're going to come back to it, try the Hazy.
Absolutely. I think, especially a stark contrast to, like some people's first taste of an IPA can be the doubles or the, what do the guys in Victoria call it? The amnesiac IPAs, where can make for a harsh night after about 3 or 4 of them for sure. But yeah, it's mellow. It's great. I really enjoy it. Fantastic.
I was going to ask you thumbs up, thumbs down, but I think I know your answer.
Thumbs up, 100%. 100%.
This is a great beer.
Awesome.
I'm biased. But I didn't pay you to say any of that
No,
nice
you
stuff.
did not. Absolutely.
So what changed for Checkers? What changed for the music scene, do you think? Like, we talk about how special it was. What changed?
What changed? Well, I think you referenced it, up front at the top of our discussion around the online, availability of music and what happened. I think the artists have had a tougher time to travel and to be able to make a living. We saw actually in Regina, I heard complaints from my friends that played in different bands here in the music scene for a while there. They lost a lot of venues. So you had, Channel 1 closed down, and then you had the state, right, or the district, I guess it was, in the later years, that did have stage and had bands in. You had the Owl that was, I think when it moved into its new location, I don't think it was as active with its live music scene. So you had a bit of a decrease in the availability of these guys to book live shows and bring in touring acts. Regina's always had a challenge with bringing in those smaller acts based on geography. So the distance to travel between urban centers. So a lot of the acts would go through Saskatoon and then direct to Edmonton because they could get more shows in a shorter time period, I think. So I think that continued to be a struggle. And with less venues, I think you had less visibility on those acts. I also think that you had Much Music at the time. And Much Music was a great facilitator of introducing us to new talent. They had we had CBC Brave New Waves, which was a big Saturday night. I listened to that every Saturday night when I wasn't working, and even recorded it on my cassette tape when I could at home on my stereo in my room to just see if there's any bands that I'd heard that they profiled or interviewed on the show. And Much Music's format, I think, over the years changed. Like, they got away from music videos where you had alternative or metal, like hour or half hour shows that were that genre, and I think that disappeared. So I think that the consumer more went to the online means and relied a little bit upon word of mouth. You had the death of HMV, and you had some of those changes on the retail side of things. So I think music just became less available to go in and pick up or listen to. There you could listen to the CD and figure out if you wanted to buy a couple tracks, and that really changed.
Part of me wonders if the ease of getting music took away from the purposeful act, and when you didn't have to work for it, when you didn't have to earn it, it meant less. You held on to it less tightly because it was so easy to just fill up 100 gigabytes on a hard drive with whatever random music, instead of saying, I picked out this CD and I had a conversation with the guy at the till, or my friend said, hey, you really got to check this out on this cassette tape. Like, the purposeful act of hitting stop and record and timing it to hit that radio play, that gives a kind of an enrichment to the experience, and that just doesn't exist anymore.
It's a fascinating comment, Matt, because now that I reflect on my CD collection, my wife hates my CD collection, by the way. Like, I kept them all. I have them all.
Hates them because they take up space?
Because they take a lot of space. Yeah, they have a lot. So most of my Checkers library I've made a digital copy of them now, but I have the CDs and I won't let them go because to your point, I remember I can grab a handful of those CDs. I could have brought them in here today, and I could go through the CDs and I could tell you where I bought each one of those CDs. And I probably have got to be over 1,000 CDs at home in basically in storage cases. But I could tell you where I bought all of those albums. And, I think about some of the times and the places where we listened to them. Like, one of my all-time favorite albums that was really important to me, I remember, shout out to my old roommate, one of my best friends, Darcy Johnstone. Darce, amazing musician, incredibly talented musician, and he's been able to maintain his career doing that. He was going off to music school in Los Angeles, and I was like, I knew he was gonna be gone for 2 years, and I didn't know it was gonna happen. And he meant a lot to me because we had a lot of great experiences together. So I sent him with my favorite album. I said, "Here, take this. This is the one." The album's by a band called Farside out of SoCal, and the album's called Rigged, and it's like one of the top 10 emo popcore kind of albums like of all time, in my opinion. And I sent it with him, and he left. He went to school for 2 years, and he came back, and he's like, and when he came home, he brought me the CD, and he gave me the CD back, and he's like, "Thanks, that was great. It got me through homework, and it got me through the things that I needed to." So those are the kind of memories I have attached to something like a CD.
You don't want to give it up.
No, I don't. I don't.
A dirty admission for me, I still remember the last time I bought a CD and said, "I'm gonna stop buying CDs now," and it offended me, the experience, so much that I stopped purchasing music consciously. It was System of a Down.
Yeah.
And they had DRM locked the CD, so it wouldn't play properly in my car.
Ooh.
And I couldn't put it on my iPod.
Oh.
And I was like, "Okay, I'm done. I spent way too much money on this to not get to listen to it." And I resolved from then on, I was like, "I'm out." And I haven't come back.
Yeah.
Because I wanted things to be easy, and I didn't have the habit like you guys.
Yeah.
Of chasing down that experience. I just wanted my music my way.
Yeah.
And I kind of got lost, and that's too bad, I think. I look back at my dad's record collection, and he has great taste in music, and I was just too young to appreciate it. He had like The Clash and Cars and all these amazing great albums. I go look at the album art, and as a kid I just took it for granted. Like he was playing the Hip and the Smalls and all these bands that you're talking about. He was listening to those, and I just didn't get it. He'd be playing Blue Rodeo and all these great acts, and I remember him telling me about going out to Channel 1 and going out to watch this live music, but I never inherited that because it was gone by the time I got old enough to go to the bars.
Well, I think the other thing that we didn't talk about that really resonates as far as the change is the commercialization, and we'll call it the how some certain individuals have turned it all into a big business venture. Like, look at these major network television shows that make gazillions of dollars, pre-screening stars to guarantee they're going to make $1 zillion by the time they get to the end winner of the song singing contest, that they've garnered enough support from the general public that's been watching the show every week to say, "Yeah, okay, congratulations, you're the winner," expecting millions of people. And it happens. Millions of people to go out and buy that album. And the popularity of those shows have done nothing but grow. We have, for a while there, even on the band side, I remember for a while there they had a contest where there was like a panel of judges on a TV show, and they were it was In Excess, I think, and their lead singer had passed away, and they had this TV series to pick the successor for the lead singer of In Excess, right?
Okay, yes.
And so they had that whole thing, and that's what I remember in the early. I don't know how long ago that was, ages ago, but I don't know how long. But you saw some of this commercialization around the music, and that didn't exist. So you had them rallying these cries for people to try and generate capital to produce a number one hit album through the course of selling commercials in a television series. Well, that wasn't really going on. It wasn't really something. If it was going on, I wasn't paying attention to it. I mean, I was out at the baseball diamond as a kid, or riding my skateboard around with my friends, right?
I don't know if that was a good thing. I mean, how many Trent Reznors would you get from a reality TV show?
Yeah, you probably won't. That's the thing, because some of those great artistic minds, they're hard to convince to leave their own homes sometimes, right? So
How many Nirvanas would come through a singing competition?
Yeah. Yeah,
But
that's for
can
sure.
can we deny the impact?
No, absolutely. I think you're right. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's a great. I mean, some of these kids are getting a chance to profile their talent well beyond what they would reach on their own. So, but from that sense, in terms of something different and something novel and a new sound or a new, changing the way things are done, or these guys that I'm just thinking of. A big record label producer, Steve Albini, I think his name is, and Steve made his own amps. Like I think he produced a Nirvana album, or he was producing some big name rock albums, and he had a band called Shellac. They played in Regina, I think, a couple times. He made his own amps, so like they were making their own gear and playing their shows. It sounded totally different than anybody in the rock scene or in the almost metal scene at the time. Very, very underground. That working with big name labels, selling millions of albums, and in the studio with these guys, he took all that stuff and said, okay, that all sounds great, and I think it's produced well for what it's done. I'm going to take what I learned from that. I'm going to make something completely different and completely not like any of that stuff, and it became very successful in that scene as well.
So if people are plugged into the Checkers scene, or if they have fond memories, or maybe they even want to kind of get a taste of that experience because they missed it out the first time, where can they go get this?
Yeah, well, the first thing is I want to say thanks. You guys have made tickets available at the tap room. So if they want to buy tickets to come out, it's going to be a super great night. We've got several of us who DJ'd. Roberto's coming out, and most of the Checkers regulars will remember Roberto because he was really, the guy for us growing up. He was the guy that hired me and brought me in, and he left, and I left for a little bit, but I came back, and he fueled a lot of those memories of the place for me. So there's a few of us doing the music. You can expect the exact same playlist from that early 90s period of time when we were there. So tickets are $20. We're doing it May 1st. We're doing it at Revival, and we chose the Revival Music Room because this is the third time that we've run a similar type of event there in the last I guess it'd be 5 years. It has the same sort of vibe. It's intimate. It's only a couple hundred people, so we only have 225 tickets. Last time I looked at the Facebook event, I think they said there was like 450 people going. I hope they have tickets, but we expect it to sell out for sure. But yeah, $20 gets you in. We're doing a little. We're helping out. There's a 12-year-old hockey team that we're helping out. They're fundraising for their spring season. They travel all over the place, so we've committed to supporting them through the organization. But Rebellion stepped up to be involved that night, and we'll have a bunch of Rebellion beers there for people to drink, which I'm stoked about because I'm a big fan. And Revival's going to create the environment for us that's very similar. It's small, it's dark, it's intimate. We expect the dance floor to be one big bouncing sea of 40-year-olds, reflecting fondly on the time when they did that 20 years ago.
Nolan, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Rebels, thanks for listening today. I'm going to include links in the show notes so you can find more about the Checkers Reunion Tour happening May 1st at the Revival Music Club. It's just down the street from the Rebellion Tap Room. If you have any questions or comments about the episode, be sure to join us on our brand new Facebook group page, the Rebellion Brewing Podcast. You just go on Facebook and you look up Rebellion Brewing Podcast, you'll find it. I'm also proud to let you know that the Rebellion Brewing Podcast is an affiliate member of the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. If you're into podcasts, you're looking for local content produced right here in our own province, just check them out, saskpodcastnetwork.com. New episodes of the podcast and new beers are coming out all the time, so be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Untappd. Untappd is like Facebook for beer. You don't want to miss out on a single thing. Thank you for joining the Rebellion.